The program will begin in 10 minutes. The program will begin in 10 minutes. The program will begin in 10 minutes.
Sunshine is gonna come now, rain down. pain this heart is holding. What's wrong when the days we have are golden? You hold on while the world outside.
Please take your seats. The program will begin in 5 minutes.
We never really know, so give me out. I can feel you arriving when it gets too much. Just send me out. Lost in all the haze. Well, I can clear the way. I know you do the same. Shine on, diamond, don't make me wait another day. 'Cause passion is passion, you know it just as well as me. Now let's stop running from love, running from love. Let's stop, my baby. Let's stop running from us, running from us. Let's stop, my baby. Oh my, my, my. I die every night with you. Oh my, my, my. Living for your every move. Spark up. Buzz cut, I've got my tongue between your teeth. Go slow, no, go fast. You're like a
Please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
Let's stop running from love, running from love. Let's stop, my baby. Let's stop running from us, running from us. Let's stop, my baby. Oh my, my, my. I die every night with you. Oh my, my, my. Living for your every move. Oh my, my, my. I die every night with you. Oh my, my, my. Living for your every move. Oh my, my, my. My, my, my. Should be the last night ever. Should be the last night where I got my name on this treasure. On this treasure. Oh my, my, my. I die every night with you. Oh my, my, my.
Please take your seats. Our program will begin now.
I was a little bit early there. Hello, everyone. It's great to see so much networking and interaction going on. Whether you're joining us virtually from all over the world or in person here in Chicago, we are so excited to be with you. I'm Janet Wu, anchor reporter for Bloomberg based in Boston. So naturally, a lot of my interviews on a daily basis happen around innovation and technology. And I am so excited to host this presentation on intelligent automation transformation in a time of uncertainty. Economic concerns are leading to corporate cultures that demand cost savings along with productive growth. In a recent poll that we conducted on social media, almost half of respondents said cost savings, return on investment, those were the top metrics for senior management to greenlight new projects. So today we will discuss how organizations can reduce economic pressure by using intelligent automation to create efficiencies while also increasing stakeholder values. But new solutions need to be adopted, and that's not always easy. That same poll also found that fewer than half the respondents said that their company culture was one that embraced new technologies. So that is something else we are going to discuss today. How to build support for automation projects from senior leadership to employees at all levels, especially the employees that will be directly impacted. And we will look at ways to efficiently create new projects with positive outcomes. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. For all of our virtual attendees, if you experience any issues with your audio or video, just please do this simple old-fashioned thing first. Just try refreshing your browser. You can also use the chat box at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, probably about here, for help during this time, this session. You can use that anytime for support. We have partnered with Wordly, an audio-to-text platform that will be transcribing all of the conversations in real time in order to make this event more accessible. And you can access Wordly via the link in the session description. This session is meant to be interactive. You're going to learn from the speakers. They also want to learn from you. So we would love to hear your thoughts throughout the program. To submit questions virtually, just click open the white tab on the right side of the video window. And for those of us in the room, very easy. See that QR code? You can scan that. It's on the placards on your table. You can also engage with us on social media because we want to be up to date and modern. Just use the hashtag #IntelligentAutomation. I would like to acknowledge our sponsor, IBM, for making this conversation possible. And with that, please welcome Pratik Gupta, Chief Technology Officer, IBM Automation.
4 in 5 CEOs believe that investing in sustainability will improve business results in the next 5 years, but only 23% of them are implementing sustainability strategies in their organizations. Barriers like a lack of expertise or not knowing where to start can prevent business leaders from acting, despite believing sustainability will drive business. That's why IBM is committed to helping companies align their sustainability goals to business objectives while complying with increasing regulatory demands. With data-driven innovation through industry-leading consulting and technology capabilities, IBM helps businesses to operationalize sustainability goals, co-creating solutions with an ecosystem of partners to uncover new opportunities and find cost efficiencies without compromising profitability. IBM can help companies accelerate their journey across 5.
Thank you, Janet. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really excited to be here with the Bloomberg team and all of you today. The theme of this event is transformation in a time of uncertainty. Now, I'm sure all of you are navigating uncertainties in your job, whether it's labor shortage, demographic changes, supply chain still continuing to cause problems, and even technological disruptions. A single day doesn't go by when I go to a meeting and somebody's talking about generative AI and ChatGPT, right? So these are things which are happening in each of our lives. At IBM, we believe that intelligent automation and AI give you a competitive advantage to navigate these disruptions. Now, with Earth Day around the corner, I think next week, I'm really excited that today's topic is how do intelligent automation and AI help create a more sustainable future, while at the same time prioritizing your business objectives and meeting your revenue goals. Now, some may think that those are two incompatible objectives, but what we have seen is if you apply intelligent automation and AI correctly, you can achieve both. So I'm really excited that that's the conversation today, and it's more important than ever because of the future of the planet, that we have to be thinking about how do we get more sustainable and meet our business objectives. Now, let me put it in context. There was a survey done by IBM Business, IBV organization, and they surveyed a lot of companies, and 80% of the companies said sustainability and ESG is amongst the goals they want to focus on. And 86% of them said they actually have written a strategy for meeting the sustainability and ESG goals. But only 35% have actually started implementing them. So now if you are amongst the 65 who have not started implementing them, or even if you're amongst the 35 who have, right? Intelligent automation gives you the ability to jumpstart that and be a catalyst in that journey. Now, today, we're going to hear from a diverse set of people. They're going to talk about their insights, the best practices, and how they are transforming their various different businesses. And I use the word different deliberately because you will see a huge diversity of the businesses they are in and how they're using large amounts of data, tracking, storing data, using automation to take advantage of that data to take action, operationalizing it for meeting their business objectives. Now, while each of them have different roles and responsibilities, they have one thing in common. They are all thinking about sustainability. They're all thinking about data. And they're all thinking about automation to achieve the goals. And really, finally, my challenge to you all is when you go back, ask your organization or other organizations in your company, how are they planning to meet sustainability goals? Is your IT department moving towards sustainability, or are they keeping the servers running all the time? Think about how you can leverage automation, intelligent automation, AI, and data to prioritize your business needs as well as the planet. With that, thank you very much. Enjoy the conversation and the discussion today. Thank you.
You're going to be very efficient with your time. We're going to have some fascinating conversations where we can exchange ideas. And now we are going to dive in. Intelligent automation is critical to an organization's long-term success. That we know. But too often, companies are focusing on narrow projects. And now executives across all these different industries are looking for bigger outcomes, broader outcomes. We are lucky to be joined today by 3 leading executives, and they are going to discuss how they are taking automation to the next level in their companies. I'm going to turn the stage over to my colleague, Ritika Gupta, on-air reporter and producer in New York, for a conversation with Jared Anderson of ADM, Katrina Redman of Eaton, and Paddy O'Connor of Boston Scientific.
you very much, Janet, for that kind intro, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ritika Gupta. I am a reporter and a producer at Bloomberg TV, and I am delighted to be here to moderate this panel on automation that packs a punch. And it's focusing on what companies are currently doing with automation, but also how they're taking that to the next level, and how we create high-value projects that work and how to avoid those that don't. And we've got no one better to do that with our esteemed panelists. But first, before we delve straight into that conversation, I just want to remind you all to please do continue to send questions, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. But let's get straight into it. And first of all, I'll reintroduce you all to Jared Anderson, Global Head of Artificial Intelligence at ADM. Paudie O'Connor, Senior Vice President for Global Supply Chain at Boston Scientific, and Katrina Redmond, Chief Information Officer at Eaton. So thank you all for joining. First of all, if you could just explain to us your role within your company and how you're currently using automation and AI, or your goals for that in the future. So we'll start off with you, Jared.
All right, so my company is one of the world's largest ag companies. We have 800 locations, over 300 manufacturing facilities around the world, roughly 20-some thousand employees. If you haven't heard of the company, I'm sure you've eaten something from our company or that's passed through our company. So the way we approach AI, I was actually brought on about 3.5 years ago to start the Competency Center. So I moved my family out from Seattle, joined the company in Northern Kentucky, which I'm originally from California, worked out in New York quite often. So it was a new thing for me. So the opportunities within agriculture are huge, you know, and what we do within a company from a global scale is massive. Much of my work was in the financial industry, but coming here, I saw the opportunities. So I'm actually very, very privileged and happy with what we can do, you know, with food sustainability and increasing, safety of the whole food chain.
All right, and break it down for us in terms of AI. So how are you actually using AI technology to get food onto our tables in a different way or a quicker way?
Well, there's so many opportunities in terms of efficiencies. So I'd say from a strategic point of view, we look for opportunities. And the main thing we need to look at from a strategic point of view when you do opportunities, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the challenge you're trying to address? What's the technology that you can use to solve those problems? But in order to do things from an AI perspective, to implement them, you need a collaborative effort with a whole lot of different teams. And many times historically, people just say, oh, let's go very surgical, very quick. But we have to look at it from a system perspective, wide. You know, you hear things like in the past, like RPA, let's go very surgical. Well, to really get the benefit from an AI perspective with the tools that we can enable now, we have to look across the entire company, and it's broad. So you have to involve a lot of different people, and you get their perspective. You get a diverse set of perspectives. So when you implement these kinds of technologies, it's not a one-time shot. These things are meant to scale. And so when you get a diverse set, it's not something you just implement and then you monitor and you're making sure it's being used correctly, but it's something that can be expanded and built on and mature. It's fascinating.
And Paudie, talk to us about Boston Scientific. So you make a range of medical devices and you run the supply chain there. So talk to us about how you're using AI in your business.
Yeah, so Boston Scientific is a reasonably large med device company. And in the supply chain, we have about 24,000 employees, much tighter factory network, so maybe 15 or 16 factories. I've been with the company now 24 years, so I'm either very unemployable or I like it there. So we'll go with the latter. But automation for us over the years, traditionally, I remember one product we bought off this company, and their forecast was 25,000 units a year. Today we do 6 million. So that's old school classic automation. So we built a machine that knocks them out. So when we think about, but that's great. It works in one factory, but it doesn't work enterprise wide. So when we think about automation now and all these tools like AI that I am still in learning mode on, we're trying to think about how can we make an impact across the enterprise. So if we look at our growth profile, and COVID in one sense was a blessing because it had accelerated the challenges of labor that are coming when you look at demographics in the US and Europe today. We've kind of peaked at workforce, but people are living longer and need med devices. So how do we? So if we didn't do anything, we'd have to hire 4,000 or 5,000 people to build product in the next few years. Where do we find those people? So how we're trying to approach it is, what are the activities that are common across our plants, and leveraging technology and AI and automation to eliminate them. So human visual inspection is a great example. About 40% of our people do that for a living. Now, it's not super rewarding. It's super important because the quality of products, you just can't get it wrong. But we're trying to leverage that technology to assist those people and help them to do other more value-added activities, and that works out great. And we've some super examples, and I'd say we're at the beginning of the journey, but it's something we have to solve, or we're not going to be able to get where we need to get there.
And Katrina, talk to us about your role at Eaton, and which is a global power management company, and you've got a big portfolio there for us.
Yeah, so we have about 226 manufacturing locations, 90,000 plus employees operating in 130 plus countries globally. So we're, as she said, in the intelligent power management business. We're in aerospace, vehicle, e-mobility, electrical. I hope that we were involved in the ecosystem that allows this building to be powered. So we make those products. There's a lot of work being done, obviously, in connected products. Artificial intelligence, how it can be applied, to software outcomes in this whole ecosystem that you guys you touch every day. And you think about the microgrid, how do utilities use different power, sources. There's so much involved in making that a reality. And then the challenges in that environment when you're trying to bring so many more connected products online, and then you're developing these more microgrid structures instead of the old, type of utility style, power engagement. So all of those various elements have, artificial intelligence or software design, with smart connected products. And I would say internally, when you think about in Industry 4.0, we're trying to figure out how do we make things more efficiently, what are the insights and business outcomes we can drive to make them more efficient. These technologies are part of that ecosystem. And if there's any company out there not actively promoting and trying to understand how you can apply that logic and those technologies, it's unfortunate because these things are starting to move faster and faster. So, it's, to your original question, it's in a little bit of everything we do. And then trying to drive sustainability within our corporation with our own footprint. How can we apply these technologies? And they're highly applicable, and they're becoming, more point specific every day.
And some of the key arguments for automation is, of course, reducing costs, increasing efficiency, or improving the quality of a product or a service, and therefore maximizing, stakeholder value. So Katrina, I'll start off with you. How do you go about identifying worthwhile projects in intelligent automation, in terms of power management solutions? And I'm also interested to know how you also go about judging whether you invest or you do those internally.
Yeah, I think people need to get comfortable with the concept of fail fast. I don't think we all know exactly where to apply. We have return on investment structures that we put together in order to make determinations about what we're going to spend money on. But we're trying to spin up, multiple proof points at any given point in time to try to figure out where do you want to place some bets, what timeline do you want to provide those, and you're always tying that to business outcomes. So if there's specific challenges in the marketplace, you're trying to associate what you're working on, how you're spending money, what your cycle times and support will be in those different endeavors in order to understand what you're going to bet on. But I would tell you, I think we're betting on multiple things, and you're trying to do proof points in different ways. And then it's more of a VC mindset instead of the old world kind of ERP, large, give somebody $100 million to go do an ERP project. You do a lot of this stuff with proof points with a customer, with different work that you can do. Even if it's a farmer, with our connected product, can we help his uptime? Can we create some way to provide insights in order for him to do what he needs to do better, more efficiently, and more profitably? So you take specific proof points, and then you try to farm those ideas and work those spaces, and then things hit, and you continue to evolve those particular areas. That's how we do it.
And I want to go back to, you already mentioned the pandemic and how that changed a lot of the outlook on automation. And actually, Jared, I'll start off with you because they were a significant issue during COVID in many industries, not just the food and agriculture. And how has that been resolved to an extent? And would you say the problems drove any implementation of solutions, coming from technology?
Well, the company has always had things that we want to improve on, but in terms of the pandemic, what it's enabled us to do is recognize very quickly the power of communication and AI, the tools that we use like Microsoft Teams, Zoom for many people. So they're more comfortable with that kind of technology. And now with many of the things you're hearing about, ChatGPT, anybody? No. People are becoming more comfortable with that. And we as a company have to recognize that this is how people work. And we can leverage these kinds of things and enhance our skills and our capabilities around that.
Woody, would you agree, or what would you have to say in terms of Boston Scientific's?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think for me, I'm an AI skeptic, or at least I was. And so as we stepped into the pandemic, incidentally, we had a collaboration between IBM, MIT, and ourselves, focused on a couple of different tools, using AI to help with forecasting and an allocation model. Well, the good news and bad news of the pandemic, it created a burning platform for us. So when we think about, supply shortages, we have about 17,000 products in our portfolio. Managing shortages across many of those to customers all over the world was a nightmare. So we quickly pivoted this team to work on a tool to help with that. And so I think to Katrina's point about failing fast, having something you really need to solve, no kidding around, will accelerate either an answer or a failure. And thankfully, in that particular case, we got a good answer. And we were able to kind of unburden our teams that were manually working through spreadsheets and allocating products and turning that into a machine. And our people could step up a couple of levels and think about the business versus kind of reacting to it every day. So we've another great example going now with forecasting, where older, more stable products in the kind of prime of their life cycle. The machine is way better at forecasting than 10 humans in a chain, and compounding kind of thoughts and ideas. So we've and answering your question about do you do it yourself or do you get people outside to do it? I think it's a bit of both. You kind of start with someone outside, like in this particular case, but I think you got to develop the competency in house, and that's how you kind of scale it then and customize it for your business. So yeah, very, very. Now I've gone from skeptic to believer. Doesn't happen very often. Just ask my wife.
And Katrina, do you have any specific examples of how you've managed to leverage AI into your processes that have been successful?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about even engineering cycle times, and in our world, there's different standards in different parts of the globe. Can you create a product that could be universal across multiple different regions and territories? There's different codes, for building setups and power and electricity and all of that. We have things in our ecosystem with our developers that, are looking at how do we make that robust in such a way that you could use one device and for electricity, some sort of an electrical input across multiple regions or territories. Those are things that we're, working on now. And then I would think, to your point about supply chain, it's been a challenge for everybody. The good thing about it, it's been a challenge for everything. For everybody, but a bad thing about it, it's been a challenge for everybody. So there's this situation where if you can get all of that data aggregated, if you can have something, go through it in a much faster way than 10 humans or 20 humans or 40 humans, put together all of those data points to try to figure out where are the correlations, how, what is really attributing to some of those causes. If you can be better than the next guy in your competitive space, you'll differentiate yourself. So we're doing all of those types of things within our ecosystem. And there's a ton of softwares out there that have that embedded in the capability, with AI or machine learning, et cetera, that are off the shelf these days and can partner with you very quickly on different things. You don't necessarily have to develop everything yourself. There's a lot of partners in the ecosystem that you can do proof points with as well. But there's a lot of different ways we're using it.
And Katrina, we have an audience question for you because you talked about failing fast. But how can you fail fast without spending too much? And is it this a point where we, how much should we be investing in these new technologies at this stage? And we can also, widen that out to the rest of you as well. But Katrina, if you could start off with us.
Yeah, and I'd say there's a couple of different ways on this. A lot of the partners out in the ecosystem, they'll actually invest with you on different endeavors because they want to continue, obviously, to learn and grow their particular brand in these spaces. So you can partner with third parties that are part of your ecosystem, and they'll spend a little money, you spend a little money, you'll get an outcome, and then you can jointly leverage that and take advantage of it. But to be honest, in these spaces, you can throw sensors on equipment. You can do all that stuff. Doesn't have to be horribly expensive. If you've got the idea and you try a very specific proof point, we're not talking about millions of dollars to do those proof points. You got to be very specific. You want to understand the business outcome you're hoping to drive, and you go old school a little bit and dial all the corporate fluff down and really just get to the basic and the intent of what you're trying to accomplish. And you'll be surprised how inexpensive some of these trials can be. So I would say it takes a lot for a technologist to think differently about making this 18-month or 2-year horizon or timeline. Think in agile, what are we going to do today? How can I do that piece of it? And then each day you're delivering something, and within 5 days you've delivered something that you used to take 3 and 4 and 5 months. It's not very expensive to work in those types of cycles, and you really have to train yourself differently to think differently about that and think of it as your own money and how do you want to leverage it most effectively.
And Jared, you were nodding to that. Do you agree?
Yeah, actually, when I started the group, one of my first hires was a CIA data forensics expert, and I had started the company and worked the group, and I looked at a consulting organization who came in and wanted tens of millions of dollars to do a demand forecasting solution, and I was like, this doesn't take that kind of money. So the gentleman that I hired essentially built the solution by himself in 2 months. This is the cost benefit of what we can do with AI. Yeah. People who really understand the technology, who have the imagination, the creativity, who can go after it and go after projects very, very quickly. The cost benefit is massive.
And automation and AI, as we all know, it's grabbing a lot of news headlines. It is generating billions in investments here. And some tech companies in particular, you're seeing that them trying to integrate AI into everyday products. And then there's a question of whether that's going too fast. Should we be pumping the brakes and developing that regulation first? And we're hearing that even from the likes of Elon Musk saying that. So that's something to think about. Now, Katrina, from an investment point of view, are companies investing and releasing AI tech to the masses too early?
Yeah, we were actually having a small conversation about this. The power of it is amazing. The detriment of it is also pretty mind-boggling. Like, what will it lead to in 10 years? How will the lives of the entire planet change? Are we really being responsible stewards with that technology? And should we kind of slow it down so we can understand how do we absorb it? How do we consume it? How do we use it in a way that's ultimately positive as opposed to all the downside potential risks that are out there? I mean, you're talking about job replacement. I mean, we thought the coal industry losing workers in the coal industry. Then the retail environment changed with Amazon. Now we're talking about this thing can be used anywhere, anytime, anyhow. And it can affect, sort of the entire global network. I think we have a responsibility how we use it, how we roll it out, how we leverage it, and we need to be responsible stewards of that. And I think the tech may be a little bit ahead of but then you can't. You want to embrace the innovation of it. You want to embrace the advancement of it. But how do you do it in such a way that society can consume it without it being destroyed in harsh terms?
And I think even before this wave of interest in it, it was still a concern about AI, replacing jobs. But I'm interested in Porty and Jared, in your respective industries. Will we still is there still going to be a place for human interaction, or how far is this going to go?
Oh, absolutely. That's my belief. I think we need both need to work together. And maybe just picking up on Katrina's point, I think one way we're thinking about throttling the adoption is really connecting it to a need, so that our environmental journey in Boston Scientific, I'm glad to report we were one of the 35% companies really investing in figuring out how to change our supply chain and using digital tools to model that. But we didn't start with, well, let's create a digital twin of the whole machine. We started with, what's the first question we're trying to answer? And then, okay, let's build a model around that. So we're kind of throttling the intake, if that makes sense. So again, but I think it is going to be a problem how fast it's going to come at us, as Katrina said, and we have to be responsible. But that's how we're going to manage it, I think. Focus it on questions we want to answer.
But on the flip side, I guess, you could say about investing in it too quickly. Is that also an issue that you perceive?
Well, for industry, I don't think so. I don't think there's enough. I don't think there's enough money to go around. Honestly, the consumers of this are going to be very cautious. Jared gave a great example of how we can be wise and how we use the resources to leverage AI. And I don't think companies are going to go out and write massive checks without being very focused on what we're trying to do.
And Jared, I'm interested, how do you guys use, or how can you use ChatGPT within your industry, within the food and supply chains?
Yeah, there's a couple questions here with that. So I'm going to go from one perspective where being a global food producer, we need to use AI to make things more efficient for food sustainability. In a whole lot of different areas where we can apply this kind of technology for more efficiency and whatnot, because it's extremely valuable. The other side is that, yeah, it's moving very quickly and very fast in ways that we have yet to really understand. I'm going to dive in very quickly on that with ChatGPT, generative AI, okay? My team sees the power of this thing. All of you who have been seeing with ChatGPT, the first time probably where many people in society have actually interacted with AI in a real sense, not the kind of tech you have on your phone or your Netflix, but really working with an AI tool, and you're seeing the power of this thing. Now, generative AI with image and language and everything else can be very powerful. The risky side, where out there in the industry, they're saying we got to put the brakes on this thing. Just this past week, there was an instance where somebody took the recording of somebody on the internet, because we all have recordings of our family, our faces, our voices, took that and generated a ransom saying, hey, I'm in danger, and they put that out there. Now imagine how quickly this can go into a bad actor generating, all the images that you have on Facebook, the sound, the things you've used. From a society perspective, that is dangerous, because I don't want my grandparents or my parents, getting that phone call going, hey, Mom, I need money. Oh, I can see your image. I'm talking with you. I'm interacting with you. That is scary. Now, from a corporate perspective, we have to safeguard our own company to make sure I don't get a call from the CEO going, hey, go spin this dial or something. Well, I saw his face. I heard his voice. I see his image. This is how quickly the technology can go. That's just a very small example of where they want to put the brakes on. But we need to be thoughtful that we have to use this kind of technology, as a society and as a company. And we have to make sure that we have the regulations in place from a government perspective, and we adhere to global ethical standards, and we come together on this thing. So it's a responsibility for everybody here,
And do you think, I'm just thinking about, in the news at the moment, when you hear these announcements from Microsoft, when you hear them from Amazon, the stock suddenly pops up. But again, we've talked about the need for regulation, and maybe that being from the government level before, corporations decide what exactly they're going to do with it. How important of a part is that in how quickly you see it developing, or how quickly it is developing?
Well, on behalf of the company, we need to play a part, because we are consumers and users of this kind of technology on a massive scale. People that are in the industry who understand this technology recognize how quickly it's moving, so we have to participate. So we have to be good partners with our government, and the lawmakers and people who can actually enforce, rules around how this thing can be developed. But we all know it's moving very, very quickly, and it's not going to stop. But we have to take some of these things seriously and really take a look at it. When people who have knowledge of the space are saying, hey, we need to slow down here. And I gave the example, You're like, wow, hey, you're right. I get a call from somebody that I know, and it sounds like them, it looks like them, I hear the same voice. That's scary.
And I do want to pivot here just slightly and talking about more broadly diversity in tech, because that's an initiative that I know a number of you are working on within your respective businesses. I'd like to start with you, Katrina, on how you are working with that within your company.
Yeah, so diversity in the cultural, ethnicity, gender, in those particular categories. In this space, you would think that there's more balance in the space, but there really isn't. 8 out of every 10 people you'll find are male from a gender perspective, and then there's different ethnicities involved. It's very difficult really to grow a diverse slate of talent within our companies, and then add to it that I'm industrial, you've got some medical pieces, you're farm and agriculture. Those industries themselves don't necessarily lend themselves to diverse slates. Eaton, quite honestly, is one of the best, I think, at managing this. If you look at the C-suite, it's one of the most diverse C-suites out there. We actually have committed percentages that we're looking for. Do you have a diverse slate that you're interviewing? How do you look at, farming for talent, building those networks? Eaton puts a lot of energy behind that diversity and recognizes the power of it. We just moved, and my team, our diversity by 2% just in Q1, because we're very focused on driving, that talent. But you've got to make everything, single touch point that you do and job opportunity that you have, it's got to be part of that central dialogue to make a difference.
And we do actually have to wrap up now. We could have talked about that for a whole lot longer. So I want to say thank you, first of all, to all of our panelists. Thank you very much, Jared Anderson of ADM, Katrina Redmond of Eaton, and Porty O'Connor of Boston Scientific. And as I said, we could have carried on for a long longer. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back, IBM's Pratik Gupta, for a conversation with Brandon Sutcliffe, America's Financial Services Sustainable Leader at EY.
Now, in today's business environment, we are seeing that sustainability is climbing on the corporate agenda. And IBM's Institute of Business Value survey with the CEOs, almost 48% said that sustainability is one of the top or highest priorities in an organization. Now, it's no longer appropriate for companies to prioritize generating profit at the expense of failing sustainability goals. So I'm joined here now by Brandon Sutcliffe, who is America's Financial Services Sustainable Finance Leader at EY, to take a deeper dive into what we are seeing across the industry and how data can be a catalyst for decision making when it comes to reaching sustainability goals and ESG goals. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you.
To begin, Brandon, what is your role within EY, and what role do you play in helping your clients achieve their broader sustainability goals?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's nice to see everyone. My role is I don't work for EY and our own individual sustainability goals. I help our clients on their sustainability goals. So I help them from everything from conducting materiality assessments to see what is material to their business as it relates to the environmental, social, and governance aspects of things. Help them set their commitments, whether they're net zero commitments, social impact commitments. We work in financial services in particular, about 80 to 90% of the emissions within a financial services firm is actually associated with their financed emissions, the companies that they actually invest in. So we spend a lot of time in helping those companies understand what those emissions are and how they could potentially impact them or help those companies transition to a more sustainable society. A lot on the risk management front. What are the impacts of climate across their risk management frameworks and across their lines of business? Certainly some new product strategy and design work. There's a lot of opportunity, right? We talk about risk, but there's a lot of opportunity as well. And then, as probably everybody in this audience is familiar with, there's a lot of reporting and disclosure requirements that companies have to adhere to.
Great. Now, to operationalize sustainability efforts, an organization must leverage data across the organization and tap into intelligent automation. How is EY helping the clients use automation to approach this challenge of leveraging large data sets from across the organization? And what investments have your clients made relative to automation and data discovery?
Yeah, I guess I think about it in three different ways and how we help our clients. First, how do you obtain the data and information that you need to make some of those business decisions? And unfortunately, not a lot of that information is publicly available. So, where it is publicly available, you can use intelligent OCR, NLP, and other things to go out and get it. There's plenty of data providers that do that for you. So there's different ways that you can do that. But then how do you use the data that you need across all of the various different business lines and everything else? So how do you disseminate that data for its use? And then ultimately, how do you make sure that you're capturing the right data and information to be able to report it publicly so that your key stakeholders can use that information to make other more informed decisions, whether it's for investment or other reasons?
Great. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of data out there. And the key is to being able to use it effectively, to understand it, and to use it. Now, in order to help our clients meet their sustainability and ESG goals, today IBM announced a deeper integration between our signature solutions of Turbonomic and NVZ. Just as a background, Turbonomic is a capability which dynamically and automatically optimizes the IT data centers to optimize performance, reduce the consumption of IT, essentially reducing the runtime footprint. And NVZ is a market-leading product which is responsible for collecting, analyzing, and reporting on ESG data. So when we combine the two, the solution allows you to meet this low-hanging fruit of collecting, analyzing, and then operationalizing that information to reduce some of the carbon footprint. So if you were to approach this from a perspective of chief automation officer or someone with similar leadership responsibility, overseeing intersection of data, automation, sustainability, IT processes, what advice would you provide in evaluating such solutions?
Yeah, you mentioned there's a lot of data out there. So I think what we found is, there's tons of information around environmental, social issues. So it's not necessarily the quality of data, it's the quantity of data, it's about the quality of the data and information. So a lot of times the first step is to really understand and inventory all the various different activities and data that you have that people are leveraging across your organization. And all of you probably are too familiar with the fact that a lot of organizations have a lot of different silos, and there might be data in one part of the organization being used for a specific purpose, but that information could be used in another part of the organization, and it's not just being leveraged the way that it should. So we're seeing a lot of organizations think about creating a data utility to really house what requirements are needed across the organization so that you're more efficiently using that data and information. And a lot of times, the data you need is somebody else in the organization probably already has, right? So instead of going out and trying to get it yourself and paying extra money for it or anything else, you can probably leverage what you already have.
Now, that's a great point. The solution I just talked about, the NVZ suite collects data for a broad ESG and sustainability goal, and not necessarily just for IT usage. And here's an example of how we can help bridge the gap between that collection mechanism and IT to start off at one point. Now, as we close, I want to quickly call out that both EY and IBM have recently announced their commitment to address complex ESG challenges and drive value-led sustainability. And Brandon, I know you're as proud as I am to work for an organization that prioritizes ESG and sustainability as a corporate policy. Any final comments you have before we close?
Yeah, I mean, I think we heard the other panelists' proof of value and other things. I mean, there are so many different use cases out there. And one of the things that I'm really excited about in working with IBM is really helping organizations sort of front to back, collecting that information from their clients about what their scope 1 and 2 emissions are, the emissions that they use, and leveraging technology and automation to be able to aggregate that information and really get a better understanding of what the emissions are from a measurement and monitoring perspective, because ultimately just capturing that information once and reporting it out really doesn't do anything unless you're managing and monitoring it on an ongoing basis. And that's what, from a societal perspective, we really need. We need more real-time information to be able to make some of those decisions to help us move to a more sustainable society at the end of the day.
I'm really excited about this joint capability with leading climate change and sustainability services and technology from EY and IBM software. We are truly creating a set of frameworks and best practices and accelerators for decarbonizing a certain part of your organization, whichever you choose to begin with first. So I'm looking forward to greater collaboration between the two organizations. Thank you very much for your time and insights. Passing back to Ritika. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are now going to look at how one company is using automation to transform relationships with customers. We are in Chicago, and I cannot think of a more customer-centric company based in Chicago than Hyatt. So please welcome Ray Boyle, Vice President of Data and Analytics. So Ray, let's just jump in. 1,250 properties around the world, so we have the global challenges. That's a lot of data. That's a lot of customers. What are you personally managing on a day-to-day basis?
Thank you for having me, by the way. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I've got the data analytics and strategic intelligence aspects of what we do at Hyatt. So the work that we're doing really focuses on Hyatt's purpose. So Hyatt has this amazing purpose of caring for people so that they can really excel, and the data world is just a mirror and reflection of that purpose. So our purpose within data is advancing care through data-driven decisions and automation. We really focus on those aspects of automation, and that takes the form of developing the organization's culture and making sure that the whole company is sort of locked onto the data strategy, that we're building an operating model and a talent architecture to really accelerate our ability to plan and grow the organization, that our leaders are becoming fluent and think and deal with business challenges with a data and an automation mentality as they work to grow and develop the business. We also focus on sort of a series of pillars. One is this idea of personalization and trust. So making sure that our systems are responsive to the guest and growing with the journey and really caring for them throughout that journey, but we're doing it in a way that's high security and high trust, and developing sort of the capabilities of the company. Operations are a really big deal. So operationally, we want to make sure that the entire system is sensing and receiving information on our guests, and then we're really making a long-term drive to make the company simpler and more efficient, and then support the growth of the organization as well, Janet. So,
yeah, because there are more and more properties all the time. Let's dig into the experience of the customer, because we have a great diversity of companies in this room as well as joining us virtually. But Hyatt is a company that sees its customers in person.
Yep.
They actually come to you or wherever Hyatt is where they need to be. Can you give us some examples of how Hyatt is using automation to actually improve the customer experience?
Yeah, first off, everything in our world begins with our guest and our customers. So, you know, we're sort of designed to care for folks. So when we think about automation, there's a couple things that I really think about. Number one is we've got systems that really sense and provide feedback into the business every day, all the time from our guests. They're giving us information from surveys perspective, and we're really understanding behaviorally where they're at. And that's huge because we've over 160,000 employees, and people are sensing and responding to that feedback all the time. And then we want that data and that information to flow into the way that we build strategies and plan, and make sure that from a technology perspective, we're accelerating the flow of data, we're reducing the latency of data, we're tying that into systems that are designed to be extremely smart, right? To make sure that they can consume algorithms and sort of drive into sensitivity around the guest. So that takes the form of personalization systems that are making sure that the content that a guest sees is right, depending on kind of where they're at in their journey, what's happening within the context of their travel. It gets into things like search. You know, how do the systems respond when someone's looking to book a property, and sort of helping to execute those capabilities. Other examples would be just simplifying the journey, so making sure that we make check-in more seamless and smooth, and getting into a room more automated over time, and just sort of reducing the stress and helping guests flow through that process. So lots and lots of work that's going on to sort of really take care of our guests.
This afternoon, we've been talking about some of the challenges of getting a workforce to adopt technology and automation and new solutions. You are thinking about how customers are going to adopt, and there's always a fear that automation is going to make things more impersonal. Are there any surprises that you've seen with how your guests, your customers, have been interacting with automation? Are there surprises in how they are using what you're automating?
Yeah, when you're automating processes and making, because we're a big company, right? We've got lots of properties, lots of journeys, lots of content, lots of things that guests are doing within our system and our loyalty programs and so on and so forth. So when we have an opportunity to personalize the experience and really perfect what we're talking about with guests at what time, it really accelerates the learning process within the business. You could see, you know, from a marketing perspective as one example, you've got many options of content that will go to a guest, so that guest can select what they care most about, and the marketing process learns faster. We're able to get a sense for what content, what types of topics people want to talk about. They want to talk about properties. Do they want to talk about the amenities in the properties, the loyalty program, the credit program, different things we're doing from a pricing perspective. And that feedback comes in much faster. The learning systems are cleaner, and then you can measure and really understand incrementality around some of those feedback loops. So.
We are talking a lot about using automation for bigger, better outcomes and with cost savings. That's a big theme of today because everyone is feeling the economic uncertainty. That's the title of this event. Have automation solutions at Hyatt, have they led to significant cost savings or better productivity? What are you seeing?
How do I think about that? Yeah, I mean, I think when you get automation right, it clearly can strip cost out, simplify the business, and add speed. You know, the work that we take on within the world at Hyatt, and the data world, is really a mirror of Hyatt's corporate strategy, and then the investment and outcomes that we want to see for the business. So we really sort of lock onto those. And a lot of those are designed around simplifying the business and reducing cost. A lot of them are about taking care of our guests, or growth objectives and things along those lines. So yeah, but when automation is applied in the right way, it helps with the journey. It helps our colleagues in terms of their work and the things that they do to care for our guests and work together. And you can certainly simplify the business and get some of those outcomes as well.
I want to bring up the stress of the pandemic because so many companies remain impacted by what we all went through in the last 3 years. being a hospitality company, you basically had to shut down and then scale back up. And how did technology help with that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I joined Hyatt probably about 3 or 4 months before the pandemic hit. So when I came into the business.
Great timing.
Great timing, yeah. It was clearly, an ultra shock in our industry. So appreciate that commentary. 2 things that I would say about COVID that I think were really interesting. One is the systems that we use to plan the business and manage the business and drive the business and understand, seasonality and what demand's going to look like and who's going to show up typically in the property and all of that. How many plates to serve in a restaurant. The systems and the data that informed all of that stopped working immediately. So the first thing I would note is the signals that we use to understand what's happening in the world changed, and the company had to be extremely agile in thinking through how do we understand the disease, how do we understand COVID, how do we understand the policy framework in different regions and countries around the world, who's open, who's shut down, how are travel restrictions sort of playing out. We had to get information on who's moving in different areas. Where is because the recovery and the way the industry responded was really distributed around the world and in different regions and different locations. So a lot of detailed information on what we're seeing in terms of movement, travel, staycations. There was a lot of different travel patterns that emerged. So just getting the data right to make the company agile and move and sort of flex with demand was really, really important. The other thing that I found, or we found as we went through COVID, was you had to think differently. So the speed of innovation, the way that silos broke down, the way that people worked together to solve problems really transformed, and the company kind of had to come together and work together. And Hyatt's got this beautiful culture, so when people were working through that, it was pretty powerful. And I think a lot of the agility and the speed that the company received through the COVID experience is really sort of helping and a big part of what we're doing today.
Yeah. And I want to bring up, you have a presence around the world. So you had to do totally different things, say, in parts of Asia, where their COVID protocols are much different. Like, you are not allowed to go to work. Yeah. You have to stay inside your house at all times, versus maybe other places in Europe, and then scaling up so differently. That was a lot that had to be managed.
Regional issues and differences, compliance and government-related issues, business travel versus group travel versus transient travel versus people that want to go to the beach. I mean, just the way that the whole urban versus, sort of rural or suburban travel, just all the dynamics of the industry have been, just interesting to watch. And the company's really had to be flexible and agile as we work to sort of take full advantage of the opportunity and then recover when the guest is ready to move and we can meet them where they are.
So to share with the people in this room and joining us virtually who represent so many different kinds of companies, how does Hyatt evaluate new proposed projects? How do you know when to invest and when to say, okay, let's try this?
The work that we do in the data and the machine learning space is designed to be a mirror of the company, right? So we've got a corporate strategy, and then we've got a process that we go through to determine which initiatives are most important for the company, what the outcomes of those initiatives are designed to be. And so the work that we take on is really driven by those outcomes. So we sort of get in and support the way that evolves. From a data perspective and a technology perspective, we think of what we do as a product. Like, data is a product, the data itself, the enablement of that data, the way that we build capabilities for the business, the way that we develop algorithms and things that are going to support the application system. So for those, the way that we evaluate performance is often specific to the capability of the product. So it might be about adoption, it might be about incremental revenue, it could be about bookings, it could be about the SLAs and the performance of the technology and the quality of the deliverable itself. So it takes a couple different flavors. Yeah, but we invest, sort of to support the things that are most important to Hyatt.
So I don't want to put you on the spot with specific numbers, but you have 1,250 properties.
Yeah.
You are, of course, very customer-centric, which means that you're labor-intensive. What's the rough number of the workforce? It's tens of thousands of people.
About 160,000.
160,000 people. So how do you create a company culture that not only makes that many people feel cohesive, but creates a culture that so many different people working in so many different roles will embrace new technology solutions?
Interesting question. So first off, I think about data a lot. So data is everywhere. Data is everyone. It's sort of everyone in the business consumes it. The technology teams are all publishers and producers of data, and so on and so forth. So I think about two things. One is leadership, right? I mean, it's in a lot of research that we see within our company, but generally, great leaders are data-driven. Great leaders are thinking about the application of automation and technology in the way that they care for their customers, in the way that they develop the function. And they're fluent, like making sure the company understands how we want to measure the business and understands those metrics, understands the linkage between a clean room and the profit of a property, things along those lines is really, really important. So from a cultural perspective, just understanding the relationship between good data practices and leadership is really important. The other thing that we pay attention to culturally is the operating model, right? Because the business has a really important role to play, and business people have a really important role to play in, understanding how they want to transform their function, in the stewardship of the data that they use, to manage the business, in the quality of the data that as they see it, in the change programs within the business. So super important. The technology world owns the applications. They really know the data, and they have a huge accountability to get that data flowing, to make it lower, faster, rip out the latency of the business and serve the needs for data and information across the organization. And then the data organization and the data teams, they have to make sure that we've got standards and core platforms and governance and security, and we're engineering the data so that it can be consumable, build once, consumed many times, and horizontally available for the decisions and the automation that really power the company. So culture is about getting that whole organization to play. Everyone knows the roles that other people play. They know how to pop and roll and really help to drive the business forward. So you got to pay attention to a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and these are customers that are paying attention because there's something about personal. There's something so personal about where you stay. Like under no circumstances for a frequent guest, can you say, I don't have your reservation, or I don't see that you've stayed 100 nights with us last year, whatever. So a lot goes into the security and the management of that data.
Yeah.
Is this a division that you are in that is growing massively within Hyatt?
Is this a division that, I think the needs for what we do from an investment, like the company wants to do stuff, right? And they're trying to figure out how to get really important and strategic things done as a business. And I think what I'm seeing is the role of data, the role of machine learning, the role of automation within the different things the company's doing is advancing and growing sort of in a natural way, but it's really at pace with what the business is trying to achieve. So yeah, we're feeling some growth, but it's just a natural function of things that the company's trying to do.
I suppose a better way of saying is that you have no choice but to grow automation because the data grows so much every year. The customer base, the properties, everything, that you need more resources to manage all of that. It seems quite daunting for someone who's outside of that.
For the growth of data, a couple things that we pay attention to, and I don't know if it's about people, but I think automation is a part of that, right? So a number of things. One is trust. Right, we really do want to make sure that the first thing we're thinking about is the security and the care of someone's sensitive data that they entrust us with. So that's one. Two is we think of data as a product. So when we think about scale, quality, smooth delivery, the sort of the agile development of capability for the business, we think of it as a product. So we hopefully don't have to have as many people, right, to do it. But that takes some work to build. we think about, as you grow the data asset, good data stewardship practices. So the business really owning the data, helping to define what it looks like and what it needs to be and do, and getting clarity on those accountabilities and make sure that's in place. And then the last thing, when we think about scaling data, is being modern, right? I mean, getting to cloud, getting into an environment where all of the new capabilities, because this industry is moving really, really fast, and it's just fascinating to see the development of it. But making sure that we're in a modern posture and we're in a good position to take advantage of emerging capabilities and everything that's happening in the industry is important as well.
In the last minute, can you talk about any trends you see in the hospitality sector on the horizon?
Any trend? Yeah, there's so many. I'll talk about something in this space, right? I mean, I do think that the AI conversation that we had a chance to listen to earlier is fascinating, and we'll pay attention to that and develop it and design it. But I just get excited about thinking about things like, right now people come and they say, I want to go to Chicago, and that's how they search for a property. But you can see a day where they say, you know what, I want to go to the beach. I want to take my family. I want to be somewhere where it's between X and Y degrees, and I'd like to stay at a boutique hotel. And I'd like to know about the city. I'd like to understand if there's some things that we can do that would be fun while we're there. And just that interaction between how people dream and search and the experience that they can have within the travel industry, I think is just an area that I'm going to be watching and excited about. So.
I want to see where the next property opens.
Yeah.
Ray Boyle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
Fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So now we are down to the final panel of this event. We promised to be very efficient with your time. We have to be, because we're talking about automation and efficiency. We're going to bring up 3 more executives, and I'm very excited about this because these are all legacy companies. So they have had to innovate and automate just to keep their companies current. In fact, as you're going to find out, some of the companies originated in ways that they are no longer doing that business now. We're going to hear that in the conversation. So please welcome Talvis Love of Baxter, Mike Mahaffey of Nationwide, and TransUnion's Rahul Trivedi. Oh, I am so looking forward to this conversation because I learned so much about your companies. So Talvis Love, you are with Baxter. That's a major, diverse medical company, if you don't know. So I'm going to begin with a similar question for all of you because, as you see, we want to understand your role. So tell us a little bit about your role and what it's like to manage information in a company that's in a lot of diverse businesses and products.
Yeah, it's a great question. For those of you that may not know Baxter International, so we are a medical device, medical products company, and a pharmaceutical company. 60,000 employees, over 100 countries, 65 manufacturing facilities, and then a various amount of sales offices around the world. So very diverse company. We make everything from propofol to beds. So it's an extremely diverse portfolio that we have. I'm the CIO for the company, and I've been there for 2.5 years. And to get to your question about managing information, it's really about, if you think about that diverse of a business, what can happen is that we get very focused on the individual business lines. And we forget how to bring the pieces together, or we don't put a lot of effort in how to bring the pieces together. But for our customers, that's the value in what we bring, is how do we pull the products and services that we offer together to provide complete solutions. So my job is really kind of because I sit in the middle of all of those businesses, really understanding what their strategies are, how they drive in those strategies, what the market is looking for, what our patients need, what our customers need, that are caregivers to those patients, and then finding that common denominator of how we're going to bridge those things together to drive greater value for the company.
That seems like a big job. I wonder if you have an extra avatar or two to help manage this. That sounds like a lot. Mike Mahaffey, I want to ask you, we all know what Nationwide does, and I bet most of you can even hum the jingle. Insurance is one of the oldest, actually, businesses on earth. Your company is 100 years old now. Tell us a little bit about how Nationwide has had to use technology in order to bring this legacy business into the future.
Yeah, it's, so a lot of people are familiar with Nationwide. A lot of people know the jingle. A lot of people think auto and home insurance, but we are as you said, we're knocking on the door of 100 years now. Originally started as a rural farm-based auto insurance company that slowly expanded into other lines of protection. We don't think of ourselves as an insurance company. We think of ourselves as a protection company because we've diversified into financial services, retirement plans, commercial lines insurance, excess and surplus lines. We're the #1 pet insurer in the country. So there's a whole bunch of different businesses under the portfolio right now, and we value that diversification. I mean, that is at the heart of an insurance organization, certainly at the heart of a protection company. But you're right, we're almost 100 years old. Most of the large insurance groups are old companies, and you think about that. If anybody should be a digitized operating model, it should be those companies. We don't have physical manufacturing plants. We don't have costs of goods that we stockpile in warehouses and transform into widgets and distribute. We trade in data. We are about understanding risk, pricing risk, diversifying risk, aggregating risk, and managing that risk. And yes, it's done through people, but all of that is a data-driven enterprise. We have to understand the propensity for bad things to happen in the future across all kinds of perils, weather-related perils, mortality, macroeconomic, geopolitical, et cetera. And so that's fundamentally a data-driven business. And so we and many in the field have spent a lot of time since our inception, but certainly accelerated as of late because the world of data is different, to digitize our operations and make better use of the data to do what it is we've done for most of our existence.
By the way, someone in insurance once told me, you need insurance. Insurance exists to allow people to grow businesses, start new things, take chances, basically to make major life decisions. You need insurance as that backstop. By the way, I saw some of you reacting the way I did in our introduction, finding out the #1 pet insurer. So I think you're going to have some inquiries for Fido after that. Rahul, you are with TransUnion, and that's perhaps the one company that needs a little bit of explanation here. So first of all, at 55 years old, you are the baby on stage. Your company is the youngest. It was actually started as the holding company for Union Tank Car Company. Very different business now. You're aggregating information about how many customers now?
So probably like close to 2 billion consumers, basically.
With a B, by the way.
Yeah. So for US, everyone's data, every single financial transaction gets reported to all the 3 nationwide credit bureaus, and TransUnion is one of the 3 credit bureaus which have accreditation as a nationwide. But besides US, we operate in 36 other countries, including India, which has a 1.3 billion population. That's why that number came close to 2 billion, basically. And then we are in Brazil, we are in South Africa, we are in UK, we are in Canada. So we are in a lot of geographies there.
Yeah.
And TransUnion started in this credit business as a company which was holding paper files on everyone without any computers. That's how we started, and it was just for the Chicago metropolitan area, Chicagoland, essentially. That's how we started, and slowly we transformed, and now we are a nationwide credit bureau, and now we are in 37 countries.
Yeah. So by the way, a reminder that I told you in this last panel, big companies, customers in the millions or billions, and data that way, and also revenue. And so Talvis, I want to talk about, and I want to bring up a point that involves a lot of money. Last year, Baxter revenue was $15 billion. The company recently made a $12.6 billion acquisition in a med tech company, Hillrom. So basically, you're seeing that it's a company that's willing to leverage a lot of its assets. on technology. So that was a big decision. I know it wasn't your decision, but I want to ask you how major moves like this impact the company strategy. In some ways, companies have to make major moves like this.
Yeah, start off with, first we ground everything we do in our mission, and our mission is to save and sustain lives. And that's a pretty big goal, right? It's lofty, but it grounds everything that we do. And as we looked at our strategy, so the fact that we acquired Hillrom didn't change our strategy. Acquiring Hillrom was a part of our strategy. It helped deliver a key component of our strategy, which is all about connecting patients, caregivers together in a way that they can't do it today, in a way that it is much more effective and efficient to delivering high quality care and helping us to focus on delivering our mission of saving and sustaining lives. So when we took on that decision to acquire Hillrom, it was very intentional to help build out that component of our strategy that was already there. And now that we have Hillrom, we're working very hard to integrate it into the rest of the parts of the business. Like I said, we do everything from propofol to bed. So how do you find the connectivity between those things to drive a better healthcare outcome for patients and also allow caregivers to deliver care more efficiently and more effectively? We talked a lot today about the pandemic. The pandemic has had, I think, some significant things that have helped drive innovation, but one of the things that have also come out of that is this limited resource pool, or people opting out, especially in the medical field. It was heavily taxing for those people. So a lot of folks opted out of it, which means that the number of caregivers have gone down. So how do you provide high quality of care, because you still have the same number of patients and growing, with less people that are willing to do it? And the way to do it is with automation, data, and technology. So putting a huge focus on that, and Hillrom helps us to do that with this portfolio of products that it had when we acquired it. But we also, that was part of our strategy going forward. So we had digital health products as well. So combining those things together, we're able to create way better, greater value than the companies could have separately.
Good decision then. Mike, I want to ask you to talk about automation as it impacts how Nationwide does business. Before, insurance was someone would come to your door and maybe sit it down with papers and those files and write out a policy for you. Now people buy insurance very differently, and there are so many more products. I know that you're a chief strategy officer there, so remind us and also enlighten us how this business has changed so much.
Yeah, it really has transformed a lot. I mean, as I said, the underlying key ingredient of everything we do is data. And the way in which we transform that into a policy is different. The way in which we transform that policy through our distribution to customers is different. More of the interactions, there's a buzzword in insurance generally called embedded. How do our technology systems connect in through our distribution, which is also changing? How does that distribution connect into end consumers? More and more of that is digitized. And so we went through, with 10 core business units, we went through a decade of core systems modernization to get us to, I'll say, technology parity across them, and then made huge investments in APIs to sort of digitally transform those interactions. We have, I think, an inventory of somewhere around 500 or so active APIs that generated last year 15 billion internal transactions and a growing cadre of around 20 million transactions with customers. So more and more, as you said, of our interactions are digitized and automated. What that looks like from the top of the house, if we think about sort of the big picture, if I take you on that 10-year journey I talked about, systems modernization, 10 years ago, we were about a $31 billion sales organization with about 35,000 employees. We've moved 31 billion to 57 billion, but taken employees from 35,000 to 24. Wow. And yes, that has a mix of business and other things embedded in there, but it shows you the transformation and the application of technology at scale to digitize what we do and how we do that with our customers.
I want to stay with you for a moment. We have a great audience question that brings up cost, efficiency, cost avoidance in certain automation systems and how they're evaluated. And I want to bring up the fact that insurance, necessary, but it's also an industry that is under a lot of stress right now because all you have to do is watch the news and see how many hurricanes and tornadoes and floods are hitting. So how is intelligent automation helping to mitigate costs that can't always be predicted, just like Mother Nature can't be predicted? I know that automation has helped nationwide cost save in the $1 billion range.
Yeah, so if you think about most insurance businesses, kind of think of two chunks of the cost equation. There's the expense ratio, which is what it costs to operate our business, and there's the loss ratio, which is what it costs to pay claims. And we generally think of the trade combined ratio as $1 in versus expenses and losses out, and you want that to hover around 1 or less, so that there's some profit in the equation, which is necessary for sustainability. Automation plays in both the expenses and the losses. On the expense front, that ratio I just mentioned, how big is our enterprise and how much are we relying on repetitive human work that can be digitized for both lower cost but also much greater speed and agility. And we've done a ton to take about $1.3 billion out of the cost structure over the last 3 years alone. But the much bigger part of the equation is the loss side, which is, there you're dealing with climatic events, you're dealing with geopolitical events, you're dealing with macroeconomic events. That's the nature of our business. Data flows into how we think about not just the propensity for those events and how it's changing. We use data and analytics for all of those decisions in terms of how we create the products and price them. But importantly, what is the propensity for those things to correlate and happen together? You might think that a down equity market and a hurricane have nothing to do with one another, but it doesn't mean they can't happen at the same time. So massive amounts of data and computational power are deployed to help think about what's the distribution of outcomes and how much capital do I need to be able to withstand the probability that I'll be wrong from time to time.
Rahul, we have another great audience question. I think that you would be good to answer this, and feel free to jump in as well, any of the other gentlemen, because you do have these 2 billion customers. You do collect a lot of information about them. So someone's asking, how do you integrate privacy into the operating model? And actually, privacy is important to all of your businesses, especially with medical stuff. But Rahul, if you could talk about that with a growing, exponentially growing amount of data that you have to protect, that you have to manage. Privacy is always a big issue.
Absolutely. So credit bureaus are essentially data analytic companies. They get tons of data every day, every week, and then they got to analyze that data and then put it in the relevant consumer files. Couple of years back, we used to get like 15 terabytes of data every week. This figure must have grown since then, and that was just only for US. So you can assume the scale of the data. So when we are trying to automate any business process, we always have to look at the data privacy and the security, because at TransUnion, we take the data security and data privacy very, very seriously. So in terms of having the accesses to the system, so like whatever program accesses are, they're very highly monitored and then controlled. We have a proper SDLC program where things will be designed, reviewed, code reviewed before, and then there will be segregation of duties, so whatever is in development cannot be moved in production. So clear segregation of the duties, separate user IDs and all will be there. So if the bots are working on the sensitive data, the bots in the development area, they have a separate ID, separate system. So this is all built from the ground up as part of the program.
You all hold such senior roles in your company, so I want to quickly ask all three of you the same question, Talvis, because you're right to my left. How do you launch new automation projects? Do people internally pitch them to you? How do you decide to embrace them? And since we're running out of time, I might, if you wish to include, how do you know when to kill them?
Great. So I think it's highly dependent on the maturity of the organization with regard to automation. So I've had the opportunity to help drive automation in 2 different companies, and I've seen similarities across the two, some themes around when you get started. There's generally a lot of resistance in the organization around it. We heard about it in the first panel about people maybe worried about their jobs, et cetera. So you sort of kind of really open up the aperture, and you have people to look at their processes from end to end, which that in and of itself, at least for the companies that I've participated in, has been a new thing for them, is really to understand end to end how the processes work. But after you do that, you don't necessarily tie a ton of financial results to that, right? You're trying to plant a seed in the organization and grow a culture. So you open the aperture up, you allow the people to, with the right tool set, to do the automation across the sets of processes that you've outlined. Now, the security pieces in privacy is extremely important. You need to build that in from the beginning. It needs to be by design. So we do privacy and security by design, and it's a part of the automation process as well. What results at the end of that is generally lots of ideas that come, lots of activity that happen, and you probably get about 10% efficiency out of that. But you take that 10% efficiency, you publicize it to the rest of the organization and to really grow the capability in the organization. And then once you get to a stabilization stage where you have general understanding of automation and what it means and how you can deliver it, then you put more rigor around the ROI, the ROI for it, and what projects you're going to accept and which ones you're not going to accept. Because you'll find that you have a tremendous amount of demand that's out there for this automation, but not all of that automation makes a lot of sense. And in some cases, you even have requests for automating things that you shouldn't automate. The process is a mess, you just get a mess faster. Let's fix the mess, and then we'll think about automating.
I think that's the line of the day that I'm going to remember. Thank you so much. Mike, you had brought up before how automation helps streamline the data that you need to collect. And I'm going to guess that part of the adoption within your organization is that automation can increase the job experience for the people that work at Nationwide, because they don't have to do this very tedious work that we are seeing is driving a lot of people away. And I'm sure, Raul, the same questions there. But can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, I mentioned before sort of the shifting aggregate numbers of our employee population, but underneath that, there's a vastly different composition, I'll say, of skill sets that are employed for those jobs. And it doesn't mean they're different people. We've invested very heavily across our culture in a program we call Workforce of the Future, to sort of retool and reskill and help people move to where we think, you know, kind of the old skate to where the puck is going adage. How do we get people prepared for that digital transformation of the workforce and the processes we conduct internally? That does require a very different skill set. And we don't think of that as a process with a start and a stop. I mean, our core thesis in our strategy, and I've got kind of a random grab bag of stuff. I have strategy and digital and innovation in our pet insurance business. If I didn't mention, that was the largest in the U.S. And then our corporate development group. So we think of that as a journey, and we're constantly reinvesting to sort of upskill and reskill those things. And part of my role and part of our strategy is to say, how do we get this place ready for the next 100 years? And that's a lot more about building the athlete we want to become, as opposed to picking a destination and saying we'll get there and we'll be done. This is about muscle memory and learning an entirely different set of skills to adapt to a very data-centric, artificial intelligence augmented digital world.
I just want to put it out there. I love my job at Bloomberg, but I will volunteer to be a puppy underwriter because I think that would be great. I would need to walk them, make sure they're in good health, everything. So we are down to our last 3 minutes. So I want to start with Raul. You are growing. You were just talking about growing in India. So I want to just quickly ask you to close out how you create adoption within this massive company that has so many customers and a big workforce. How do you create fast adoption? Because the one thing we know is that with technology, the changes are happening faster and faster and faster, and it can be jarring both for the workforce and for the customer. So how do you create that culture of, you know what, we're going to trust this and we're going to buy into it?
So there are a couple of ways what we do in order to make the adoption of automation at a faster scale. One is educating people about the capabilities of the program. So that's like our outreach. And then the second part is that we share our success stories related to what we have done for these. And I have many very happy internal customers who are ready to vouch for our work. So that kind of becomes biggest seller. The other way where adoption happens very fast is when somebody has a pain point.
Yeah.
So, and they cannot solve that problem on their own. So for example, in a changing legislative environment, and credit bureaus are highly regulated industry. So when some legislation changes and now some new requirement has come and that needs to be managed within a specified period of time, they cannot hire enough people to meet that requirement. So then they come to automation team, can you please help us, basically? Yeah.
So Talvis, I saw you nodding your head when Rahul mentioned pain point. Is that a similar experience at Baxter?
Absolutely. You need to have a use case. The use case usually is grounded in some pain point in the organization. It should be, right? A problem you're trying to solve. And that's where you get the greatest focus. With these technologies and with these processes, I think it's very important to have them grounded in your strategy, have them grounded in your business operating model, and have them grounded in solving problems, right? And you may not always solve the problem the way that you intended, but if you focus on increasing the capability of the organization, then the organization has learned, right? Those people that have done those experiments have learned, and then the next time, they'll likely be more successful.
Yeah. And Mike, I want to ask you a similar question at the end. Your business has to create security in an environment that you don't know what the problems are going to be or when they're going to arrive or how many will arrive. Same thing, automation has to be key to that and preparing both the customer and your workforce to be able to deal with these changing situations.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of what Tavis said resonates with me. I mean, we're sort of a mission-driven company, and our mission is to protect people, businesses, and futures with extraordinary care across all of those things. I mean, automation and data is sort of the lifeblood around how we do that, and it's changing dramatically. And so how we reinvest in our culture to keep up with that and prepare for the future is critical.
Rahul, Mike, Talvis, thank you so much for sharing incredible insights. Really, really thank you. We hope you got a lot out of this briefing and these amazing conversations. I remind people, think about it. How often do you get to hear from high-level executives at such a wide range of companies, but you realize that everyone is sort of facing the same challenges, the same fears, the same pain points, to use that word. Thank you so much to our speakers and our fellow moderators who've been so generous with their time. Thank you again very much to our sponsor, IBM, for making this briefing possible. If you'd like more information from our sponsor, just please visit the Resources tab on the event website. And I want to thank you for being such an engaged audience. Everyone was so attentive, and I love the questions, and I could see everyone watching and really taking so much information in. For people here in the room and for those joining us virtually, you can rewatch any part of this event. You can just return to BloombergLive.com and view on demand. So please join us now for cocktails and networking, and thank you again for a great program.
without your consent, without your